Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets provide that holiday cheer that the fan base was looking for, dominating the Milwaukee Bucks on their home court. We're going to break down the big performances from the entire team as the Nets continue to show they can find ways to step up in big matchups and really start to put their foot forward as we look ahead in the NBA season.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends. It is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there is Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're free on all those great platforms. And we let you know today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. With more props, odds, and lines than ever before, Bet Online is where the game starts. And Doug, we're going to get into this 118-100 victory. Yeah, there's going to be times when we have to catch our breath throughout this episode, because if you were looking for a statement win this season, the Brooklyn Nets just gave it to you.
Oh, man, this was awesome. Awesome heading into the holiday weekend. I mean, it was a game that we had kind of marked on the calendar. We knew this was going to be one that was going to maybe start to tell us a lot about where this team stood. We were catching the Bucks kind of right at the right time on the Nets trajectory. Coming into the game, 11 of the last 12, now 12 of the last 13 games with wins. This was, and, they played a lot of teams along the way that they should have beaten. They had some nice wins too, but this one we knew against a mostly full strength Milwaukee team. And anytime Giannis is on the court, it kind of doesn't matter who's with him. And the Nets came in and ran this thing wire to wire, baby. It was awesome. They were live. They were energetic. We're going to talk about all the different stuff. It was a full team effort. This was the exact kind of win that you wanted to see from the Nets. It wasn't a squeaker. They waved the white flag with 2 minutes left. It was over, Rock. It was, we were watching this one together.
Yes, sir.
Supposed to be doing other family holiday stuff. Tuned everybody out, got on the couch and started cheering, man. This was a really cool win.
And you said it there inside of it, the energy, the team was live from the first tip of this game. There's a lot of little things that we want to point to about it, but at the very highest level, winning 11 of their last 12 games coming into this one, this was kind of a litmus test game. No Middleton, really, and we talk about this in other games too, it doesn't matter. There's enough of a full roster there for the Milwaukee Bucks that you come out of this one with how dominant the Brooklyn Nets looked, feeling absolutely electric. And the energy level and intensity for this team, which is something that we can talk about reflecting back on other head coaches. Maybe this is also as much a signature win for the team as it is for Jacques Vaughn. Because if you believe in what he puts forward in post games and pre-game press conferences and all that stuff, you expect his teams to be pretty amped up for a game like this. And they showed that on both ends of the floor, specifically, I thought, defensively over the first half of this game.
We've always wondered about the Nets over the last couple of years, is like, not wondered, I've been maybe frustrated about, keeping that same intensity up for all 48 minutes, right? Like, it's been sometimes a struggle, like for the team to just continue on a path where sort of just energy wise and athleticism wise, they keep their foot on the gas. This game, they were fully bought in from the tip to till when they all walked off the court. And you could just tell the way that they were moving on the defensive end, the way they probably felt like, hey, yes, guys like Giannis and Brook, we are outsized here. We can make it up. We can make it up with energy and intensity, and they will not be able to get into everything they want to do. If we can keep up the intensity and never back down. Yeah, sometimes he's going to get to the rim. Sometimes he's going to get the fouls. It's just going to happen. He's Giannis. He's impossible to stop. But if we keep up 100%, like 90 mile an hour all the time, flying around, switching, scram switching, trapping, everything, getting into Giannis's dribble when he's getting down, if he's got a smaller defender on him, all the stuff they were able to do. And it really threw the Bucks off. Like, you could just tell they completely won the turnover game because of it, 18-10. And it was just like, this is what we've been dying for, I think, for a long time. Not like we haven't seen it in the past, but this kind of, again, like wire to wire game where it never waned, right? You never felt like the Nets were resting on their laurels at any point. This was just really, really cool to see.
And honestly, the other part of it is too, and I mentioned this coming out of that Golden State Warriors game where it's a total blowout. It doesn't matter. And very early on, I'm looking at it and saying, oh, defensively, some of the switches, are they losing track of guys in the lane? And that could be the little breadcrumbs you take out of that one. Go, boy, now you're going to go play Milwaukee instead. And this is where you can compartmentalize the two, right? You're expected to win that game. You expect it to be kind of a fun one when you take on a depleted Warriors team. This game, you expect it to be intense. And to your point about, we've seen the Nets play in big games before. We've seen them playoff series, go to the seventh game, etc. But the difference in this one really did feel like, yeah, they are bigger than us. They do have a little bit more mass, but we're not backing down from any one of those assignments across the board. And just when you thought, not even inside of this game, where you would think that the frustration is probably going to build up and get to the Brooklyn Nets, because at some point you go, every time with Giannis getting in the lane, every time the foul calls, like you say, etc. Instead, it was kind of everyone kind of bought into the idea of, it wasn't a chippy game. And guess what? You know why? Because you were never in it enough if you're the Milwaukee Bucks to really get edgy about it. They picked up a couple of tees in this one. I think that was a little indication of frustration, but for the most part, you got outplayed. Like, you got outplayed pretty handily, specifically inside of the starting rotation for the Brooklyn Nets. We'll talk about that beautiful plus minus that they put forward there, but I think this was just a well thought out, incredibly well executed game plan that, like we said, puts the Bucks on their back foot. And we mentioned this the last couple of episodes. Be a team that the opposition has to adjust to, that they have to figure something out on. And once you start that, all of a sudden the ball's rolling downhill, and maybe you don't have to worry about what are we going to do with Giannis. He's going to get his. Can you come chase us? Can you close the gap? Can you get over the top of a 10, 15, and 20-point deficit and find a way to climb that hill? They were able to do that tonight. Nets out to that big lead early, never looked back.
Yeah. Like it was so clear that they were like, hey, we're going to win this by making it very difficult. And I think you make a really good point about the text. Like, they did pick up some tees. One was from the bench, one was from Bud, that along the way, born out of frustration. But that frustration was more about what the Nets were doing to them, and I think a lot less about like them not getting something.
Yeah, not
right?
bad calls.
I didn't think so. And
beat.
I gotta be honest, and I will say, like, I feel both of us are really objective about this stuff. Like, we're not, swallow the whistle guy when it comes to our team. Like, this is, and I don't think that the refs are out to get the Nets or anything like that. Like, I don't subscribe to those beliefs. But this was a game where I was like, if you're just watching it with an independent eye, the frustration was because the Nets were making it super difficult to do the things the Bucks want to do. Like, it was really hard for Giannis to get into the lane cleanly. It was hard for him to get the ball on the deck because they had arms just flying at his dribble all the time, right? They were willing to give up. The Nets were willing to give up some open looks to shooters. Lucky for the Nets, a lot of those shots didn't go down. Like, sometimes that will happen. The Bucks did have good looks here, but I thought it was part of a game plan that was, hey, the Grayson Allens of the world can beat us here. The Bobby Portis corner threes, those can beat us. If we're going to lose that, whatever. It's going to be difficult for Giannis to get to work. And when the team is bought in across the board defensively, and then we all know with the Nets, on their defensive effort just begets what happens for them on offense. They get out into transition. They're an amazing transition team with the guys that they have. Like, it all starts flowing downhill. The game plan along those lines really, really worked because it got so frustrating for the Bucks. They were able to create turnovers, get out in transition, get them frustrated. They missed some easy ones at times. Great. That'll sometimes happen in your favor. And again, like, 18 points. This wasn't close. At one point, we were saying, they hadn't really cut it to 10. It really wasn't that close. You're only like a little worried because it's the Bucks. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this was basically a blowout.
Yeah, you always say in the NBA, a 20-point lead can go away pretty quickly on you, but we always also talk about the sense of a game, right? Does it feel like this one's about to get away from you, or does it feel like it's just a matter of when, not if, you officially close the door? So coming up here in a second, we'll break down why the cherry on top of beating the Milwaukee Bucks by 18 is having Kevin Durant only need to play 34 minutes, give you a 24-point performance, and all of the other players that stepped up to make this a full team victory, and something that's incredibly important when you talk about taking on some of the better teams in the league like Milwaukee. Before we do that, though, we will, of course, let you know. Bring it down for a notch here. It's the holiday season, and you, if you didn't know, are now aware that you driving under the influence of marijuana is illegal. It's the same thing as getting a DUI. If you've been out having too many drinks, you obviously don't want to get into a situation where you find yourself getting a ticket, getting your license suspended, something far worse, like maybe harming someone else out there on the roads. If you ever wonder if law enforcement can tell that you're high, well, everybody else can, right? Your friends know, you're having a chuckle when you're sitting at your house, but guess what? You get out, get behind the wheel, get yourself into a heap of trouble. So why not go ahead and avoid it altogether? If you feel different, you drive different. Don't drive high, get a DUI if you do, paid for by the NHTSA. All right, right back into this one, Doug, because I said it there to close out the segment. 24 points from Kevin Durant, 34 minutes. 34 minutes. He played more minutes against the Golden State Warriors in a blowout than he did against the Milwaukee Bucks. That's obviously something that every single Nets fan has to be absolutely elated by. 9 of 17. You look inside this starting lineup, and I do want to kind of come back to the start of this game, because at a certain point, when you see the team pulling away, you do sit back and just enjoy some of it, which is amazing to be able to do. But very early on, the defensive intensity and their approach to defending Giannis and then the transition game, I thought really dictated so much of this tempo of how the Nets were going to be able to get out and be successful. They threw Claxton at Giannis. They threw Kevin Durant at Giannis. I mentioned I didn't see a lot of Ben Simmons, and then there he is popping up for a couple of key possessions against him. And what it really beget was, and you mentioned the missed perimeter shots for Milwaukee, the transition game, getting out and pushing that tempo. The best way to avoid getting bogged down in a half-court defense and some of the size that Milwaukee has is don't let them get set. And they did a lot of that over the first quarter and a half, and that's what I really thought helped build that lead and kind of build up the theme of what this game was going to be like.
Yeah, you're not going to have to rely on Kevin Durant for every single shot when you can do those other parts of the games, right? Like specifically with transition, the shots for this team were really spread out. Like I know that Durant did lead the team in shots. That's going to happen most nights. He has 7. Oh, sorry, I take it back. Kyrie had 18. Yep, Kyrie had 18. KD had 17. 2 other guys though in double figures with shots, in Warren and Claxton, and then Royce O'Neale had 9. Hit some massive threes late down the stretch to basically ice the game. But that kind of shot distribution for this team is, I think I'm with you. It's 2 things. It's one, that they're able to push the transition game and try to get out into the flow of the offense. They knew they had something with Claxton rim running at times, and he was able also to kind of just put away some shots early that I think increased his confidence late, right? Like he got some 50-50 shots that kind of rolled themselves in, but that's good because I think then later he wants to take shots that he probably should take because he's not feeling gun shy about it. When this is the team that can play like this, when they can have this kind of shot distribution, when they can make it so that other teams have to be wary of, well, 1, just getting out in transition, 2, that there are going to be other players on the team that can beat you, it's really, really problematic. And it also masks this which is increasingly not a problem, of these Claxton and Simmons minutes together, which were complete and utter winners tonight. Like they were already plus for the season, +5 net rating. That's going to go up even more after this game because every guy in the starting lineup was in the pluses by 20 or more. And this is the kind of version of the Nets that we need to see, right? This is the playoff version. We already know what like the ISO bogged down, like you said, Durant, Irving group looks like. We know what that looks like in the playoffs too. It's not going to be perfect. They will have to get bailed out at times like this. But this version of it, where you have to worry about the TJ Warrens, where you have to worry about Ben getting to the rim, where you have to worry about Claxton finishing at the rim, like that's a huge problem for teams. Like that is really, really mismatch. Like for most squads, even a team super long on the interior like Milwaukee. So positive around a win like this coming without Kevin Durant having to do every little thing. Frankly, it was the opposite.
And by the way, so I 100% agree with you. And there's a little bit layer deeper. I want to touch back on the Claxton Simmons here in a minute, coming up in our final segment. And also, I think the way that this projects forward. But it is a team victory. And when you go inside of it, Warren ended up finishing 5 of 11, 12 points coming off the bench. It's a really quiet night for Curry in this one as well. And I said this at the halftime of the Golden State Warriors game when Kevin, team had 91. And Kevin Durant had 21 points, right? So 70 points came from somewhere else other than Kevin Durant in a game that you didn't have Kyrie either. It's only an 18-point night for Kyrie Irving, right? So 17 from O'Neale, 19 from Claxton, 12 from Simmons, in a complete line that we'll discuss a little bit deeper. Like when you have 6 guys in double figures, this is the kind of balance you need to have. Because you mentioned We know what it looks like when you lean too heavily onto your superstars. They can win you games. They can give you 50-point performances, but ultimately, over 7-game series especially, it kind of wears on them until all of a sudden by games 5 or 6, you're worn down. And listen, let's keep it in the regular season. If you had to play this and the Cleveland Cavaliers and then even the Atlanta Hawks, and Kevin Durant had to go out and hoist up 30-plus shots a night and give you 45-point performances, it may not cost you in those 3 games, but it could cost you over the next 4, right? So, like, being able to look at this team, and I think when we talk about roster construction, say 2 key players, and you can throw Ben Simmons in if you want, but 2 key players in Warren and in O'Neale. These are new additions to the team, and they already seem like they're finding their niche and can be looked at as reliable, consistent players around the superstars. That is massive for this team going forward.
And we knew that when those guys are playing like this, like kind of Warren specifically, we knew that these kind of finishes for the Nets were what we've been saying in their range of outcomes. Like they have blowout potential on a lot of teams in the league. They did it to the Warriors where they completely smoked them. Yep. And this game, again, I'm going to reiterate, was a blowout. They won 18 and the starters come off with a few minutes to spare. That's a blowout. By NBA standards, that is a blowout. And we already knew that the Nets could probably stand toe-to-toe, this version of them at least, the way they've been playing, with just about anyone in the league. They can stand toe-to-toe with most. They just have the personnel at this point to be able to do that. I'm not saying they're going to win 7-game series against every one of these teams, but they can go toe-to-toe with every team on any given night. What they also have that some other teams do not have are these other pieces that when everything is clicking, they will crush you, yeah. Right? Like they will. Like if TJ Warren's going to start cooking here a little bit, that is such a lift that most teams actually don't have coming in off the bench, right? As kind of 6-man microwave stuff. And they know Harris tonight, obviously, either. But when we've been saying this kind of along the way, we've been saying if everything kind of just starts putting together, we hadn't seen for a long time, even during the winning streak, where it felt like everything clicked, right? Yeah. Now over 2 games, we've seen where everything clicked, and guess what? They crush teams. They completely crush teams because that's kind of what they're built to do now.
And I know we're going to talk about specifically this style of play. And I think a box that they checked in this game against specifically the Milwaukee Bucks, when we do think a little bit big picture, but we were talking about this before we hopped on here. I did want to make sure that we clarified it. At the 6:56 mark in the first quarter, Kevin Durant drained a 26-foot 3-point jumper off of Ben Simmons' assist. That gave the Nets the 12-10 lead. That was the last time that they trailed in the game. So they took this game from midway through the first quarter, never looked back, up 13 at the break, got down to 10 after the third quarter, and then they came back out in the fourth and really started to push that. And by the way, we can discuss it as well, found a way to buy a little bit of extra rest for Kevin Durant in that fourth quarter. I really want to drill down on the fact of what they accomplished when Kevin Durant wasn't on the floor that really made this game look that much easier for them as well.
All right, we are going to get into that in a second. I just got to say real quick, thanks for everyone that's jumping in here on YouTube. Podcast folks are going to be hearing this podcast on Monday, but you YouTube folks who have come in absolute numbers for tonight, you're getting it live here. Just another reason to subscribe to YouTube. I'll remind you at the end of the show about that. Next, we got to want to talk to you about our friends over at Bet Online. Over at Bet Online tonight, they had Nets -2. And I'm not one to disagree with our friends over at Bet Online. And maybe the industry was that was kind of the number. And maybe you're saying to yourself, yeah, against the spread this year and maybe last year or maybe forever kind of, the Nets have been not that good. Not tonight, folks. -2, not even close. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Grab the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Pro football, college football, bowl season coming up here. Basketball, obviously, every single night. If you love the podcast, you can go head on over and find those at Bet Online as well. They are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head on over to Bet Online today to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts.
Okay, so specifically when you and I were watching this game together, you mentioned it in that fourth quarter as it got to the 8-minute mark, the 7-minute mark. It was, boy, this is really critical because they were continuing to trend at that 10 to 13 point lead range. And for every possession that it remains in that double-digit advantage, it's just another 30 seconds that you buy for Kevin Durant before you have to bring him in. And I think a big part of this is keeping, even if it had been 36 or 38 minutes, the balance of on court, off court, the balance of what you need Kevin Durant to do when he's on the court. This wasn't a heavy lift game for him, right?
Yes.
Get to his spots like he always does, get those shots. But you've said this a dozen times, if not more, on the podcast, and it's 100% right. Not all minutes are created equal. These were light 34 minutes for Kevin Durant on the offensive end. Because the other side of it, I do want to get your feedback on that. The other side of it is the defensive end, and I think the collective effort from a physical standpoint that Nicholas Claxton, Royce O'Neale, Kyrie Irving, they all put in the work on that end of the floor of this game. And that's actually, I think, a really big high-level takeaway.
For sure. Like, you mentioned there that the effort for him, not every minute is created equally. There are some minutes that are going to be, some like massive load on you. And there's going to be other minutes that are just kind of coasting. I don't think anything fell into the coasting range here, but it obviously wasn't a kind of game where the entire weight of the world was put on Durant and that's what I think we're going to, as long as the team stays healthy and these guys are dialed in on both ends, we're going to continue to see more of that. From defensively, like you said, dude, the defense early on, especially around the rim, was so good. It was so good. Everything was a contest. Everything was hard. There was no gimmies at all. All the kind of back cuts that we've seen the Nets get crushed on. Now, luckily, the Bucks don't really have a ton of great guard play. I mean, no, they have Drew, but like after that, the Javon Carters of the world just like aren't guys that you're going to totally worry about. But the switching problems that kind of lead sometimes to guys free running to the rim, that wasn't there at all. And in fact, it went the opposite. They had a plan when Giannis got the ball. They wanted to trap him at times. They threw doubles at him. The times where he got on Kyrie onto him by mistake, either Kyrie was like really up in him to try to make the dribble hard, or we saw a couple times Claxton flash that way for help, right? Like
specifically, because you mentioned this in real time, and I thought it was something that you said you were trying to pay attention to coming into this year, and you saw some samples of it. That blitzing switch defense that you talked about, where you're coming over for the help, and we didn't see a ton of it necessarily in this game, but I just think there were instances of that.
A scram switch.
Idea of it's
called scram switching, and it's just like when you get a guy like Kyrie into an unfavorable matchup, if you have the time, and with Giannis, actually, you kind of do have the time to do this because his intention is to go to the rim, and so or usually is going to go to the rim. So what you're going to do is take an extra second and have someone switch onto him in that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then have Kyrie, kind of run weak side or stay in the double, because you're going to trap him or whatever. They did flash that a few times at Giannis here, which is to say, they knew their whole goal was to make life hard, right? Like make life really hard on this guy. And it's going to be frustrating, and he's going to get chippy, and he's going to do stuff that Giannis does. But as long as it's always difficult, and this is the cool thing about the Nets, like with Durant specifically on the defensive end when he's dialed in, but when you combine him with Claxton and when you combine him with Simmons, all the problems that you think this team might have, like sort of offensively spacing wise, dude, when they are locked in, they are such a problem on defense. Like those three guys are such an absolute problem for other teams. Like it's really actually probably underrated at this point. Like we don't talk about it enough, really. And they match up really well against this team specifically because Brooks not going to go into the post and really try to kill them or anything like that. But they match up really well in this team, and it's because, and I'm telling you, that threesome is, as they get even more and more minutes, like people are going to start talking about it a lot more. Like it's just really, really tough on them defensively.
And I think it makes it really made a lot of sense here again, because if you said, and I remember we're watching the game, to say, well, Ben Simmons, go take on the challenge of Giannis. He could pick up 3 quick fouls very early in this game. We've seen him have those issues over the course of the start of this season. So avoid that. How? Just keep throwing different looks at him. If you think about Ben Simmons, okay, he's the most physical player that you can put on him. But Kevin Durant has the most length that you could put against him. And then arguably Nicholas Claxton kind of has that in-between combination where he can frustrate him in a different way. So when you do that, I think it constantly makes a player like Giannis, who's one of the best in the game, have to rethink each approach on a possession-to-possession basis. And just that little bit, that little wrinkle that you throw at him is enough, I think, to put him out of sync. And more importantly, to your point about those 3 players, is if it's Durant on him for one possession, that means that Claxton and Ben Simmons are in plus matchups off of him, and you're taking away options for Giannis if he wants to look for those outlet passes. And on top of that, I thought, again, just from a team perspective, we've seen over the course of the season, there's been times when the Nets want to do that help defense, and often it's like a half a step too late. I pointed out one guy didn't have a great game. So was Yuta Watanabe. Didn't really have much to do in this one, but there were sequences where he was like a hair behind the play. I thought that the Nets were also very much on the front foot before Giannis can settle in, or anybody, by the way, before they settle into their spot, getting inside the paint, getting towards the lane, flash that guard over, little swipe at the ball, be disruptive, look for some of those turnovers. All of those things are just about frustrating and throwing them off the rhythm. And you mentioned at the front here, yes, Milwaukee missed a lot of those outside looks that were open. But guess what? If you're picking your poison, the idea is to be successful in a very specific area of the defensive game and live with the results, right? When
Sure.
Brook Lopez is 2 large steps behind the three-point line trying to take down threes, which he can do, you go, listen, I'll take that every single possession. Awesome. Love it. Keep the ball out of Giannis's hands.
Oh, totally. And I think it's very clear, like we said at the beginning, that was the game plan here. It's like, hey, if those other guys, the Pat Connaughtons and the Grayson Allens of the world, Javon Carters are going to hit threes, Marchand Beauchamp, like all these guys, fine players.
That's
if they're going to hit threes at 45% and we lose, okay, that's fine. Like that's just what we'll live with it. We'll live because you have to pick your poison, right? Like you can't defend it all here. Giannis is too impossible. He's great. He's like the best player in the NBA, right? Like, or like maybe top 3 or at worst, right? Like he's the best player. So you're going to have to pick your poison there. I'm happy with that. Some nights those will go down, some nights not, but the game plan itself is totally fine. Like it's totally fine to make it very difficult. Always make things the most difficult on the best player and then live with the results. That should be basically what every team should do. Not every single time, but most times defensively. And again, what we're seeing more and more as this team gets more and more comfortable with each other. And when they all know, this is the cool thing too, when they all know that when they're all bought in, that it's going to be awesome. Like this is the other thing that's cool to see with teams. It's like,
that's the reward.
We know exactly when we are all firing here, we're like one of the best teams in the NBA. And then when they all start to believe that all at the same time, you can just really, really see it. And they have the personnel to back it up. And to play out that game plan. Not every team could have that game plan against Giannis. Like they just don't have the bodies to throw at him or to make things hard. And so for all the size that maybe the Nets give up, they make up for it a lot with just like how great Claxton is on the ball, how great Kevin Durant is on the ball, and how great Simmons is on the ball. Just like getting in, making it hard, anticipating dribbles, anticipating passes, anticipating entry passes. Simmons is awesome about knowing sort of like guess. This is why he gets fouled sometimes. He guesses where you're going to dribble next.
Yeah.
And he shoots his arm. He'll shoot his arm across your body. A lot of players will get fouls like that every time. It works for him a lot. And it's especially going to work in matchups like this one. So I don't know, man, I'm gushing.
We're doing it tonight, boys. Yeah. By the way, 6 of 9 from the field. He had 11 total rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals. Like that's the kind of stat line that you can really love when the production is happening on both ends of the floor. And by the way, I think like a stat line like that, there's actually a lot to love just in the numbers, but this is the classic. Like when you watch the game, his impact is far greater than just what you're seeing inside of that as Doug's going to need a refill on the water, but
something in the bottom of my water there that I wasn't 100% positive what it was. It didn't have the consistency of water.
Must have been desire and joy. Oh no, someone snuck a boba tea into Doug's drinking glass. The last thing I want to mention here, 2 things. One, just that it's actually another really good sign here. This is a game where, remember, 2 technical fouls. The Brooklyn Nets only had 13 trips to the free throw line. Milwaukee went there 9 more times, but they only went +5, at that stripe. So 17 of 22, Nets 12 of 13, limited. We've always talked about Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, not guys that are looking for necessarily to draw the fouls. They play a cleaner style on offense, avoid the contact in a lot of instances. So you lost that battle at the line, the foul game, and still came out on the other side. The last really important point that I wanted to make coming out of this game too is that commitment to say, we need to play, specifically the Milwaukee Bucks, differently than we did 2 years ago in that playoff series. That was just 1 toe on the 3-point line from the Nets advancing. So I get it. It could have been successful, but this is a starkly different roster now for the Brooklyn Nets. They are able to do a lot of things in a much better way on the defensive end when you have the length. We talked about size. Their length. It's not big. They're just long. They can do it differently now. And it looked like they leaned into that challenge of, okay, we have been called. Remember, Markieff Morris, he's not playing a lot, but it was about bringing maybe a level of toughness, a mentality. I think that the Nets really leaned into that, including Kevin Durant, man. When I'm watching him getting shoulders thrown into his chest from Giannis and continuing to lean into that contact, that tells me that they kind of understand where this recipe needs to go if they want to beat some of these teams that could be a little bigger, could be a little more physical. They answer that challenge in a big way too here. So I mean, this is man, A pluses across the board. This is 1,000%. I don't know what you could possibly grade this thing other than being absolutely elated about it because you finally check that first big challenge box this season.
Dude, yeah, just a great win. I mean, I think that's just basically how we're going to sum it up here. There was a lot of little things that went right, but in the end, it was just one of the cool. They've had a lot of cool wins on the resume here lately, man, and have been for a lot of different reasons. And that is the cool. This is the neat, cool. I mean, all these like super high level adjectives that I'm using, ways to describe like this most recent run.
So
they've
good.
won. They've
so
won.
Good.
So good, so cool, so neat. They've won a lot of good games in a lot of different ways, right? They had the Pacers bench mob win. They had the complete blowout of the Warriors win. They had this game against, a tested Milwaukee team and they dumpstered them. Like they've just had some, they had the Kyrie buzzer beater, right?
Yes.
Like they've had these games,
comeback wins, right?
Right. Comeback ones, right? Like that they just put everything together. They've won in a lot of different ways. And a sign of a really good team is when you win in a lot of different ways. Like that is the sign of a very, very good team. When you have lots of different things in your bag and you have lots of different ways that you can beat other teams. Ultimately, no matter whatever the numbers say, whatever combinations work, whatever net ratings that we talk about all this stuff. In the end, if you can beat teams a lot of different ways, you are a very, very good team. So, and I think that is what we're seeing with the Nets. All right. We are going to
we will talk specifically again next week about the Claxton Simmons combination, which we didn't dive into as much as I wanted to in this one because it's working in very specific ways that I think they're starting to crack that 1-2 a little bit, and that's underneath Jacques Vaughn.
All right, we are going to get out of here on the podcast. We are going to stick around here in YouTube. We got a ton of people up here on YouTube. If you want to get a question in, we'll throw some up here. Keep it clean and put in Locked On Nets so we know if you have a question. In the meantime, make sure that you're over on YouTube subscribing so you know that when we go live, we blew past 4,000 subscribers heading into the holiday week. Now we're headed to 5. Be part of the group that follows over at Locked On Nets over on YouTube.
Don't be surprised, friends, if at some point after a win like this, you hear someone say to me, would you please put some pants on? I feel weird having to ask you twice. That's Phil talking to Alan from The Hangover.
One of the all-time great poets. We will be back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Oh, the podcast, Doug, man. Shout out, dude. We brutally just dipped underneath 400 people in the live stream right now. We expected everyone to be in here and to be intense, and this is what we want. Like games like these are where you want everyone to be able to be a part of celebrating it, and we're already getting hit with a couple of questions and comments, like this one right here. How does this game change your thoughts on a potential trade pickups? I'm gonna go. Let's see. We talked about this last episode. I'll just say quickly. It doesn't change it because Doug and I have both been pretty convicted about the idea that like you want to add a guy in the margins. We've never talked about these high level big trades for the Miles Turners of the world. Yeah. I'm unchanged by this because I don't expect there to be massive splashes, even though they've been rumored to be in some of these talks. I think there's always going to be guys that one game would never, prove or disprove whatever. I think they want a guy like, if you could get Kuzma right now, would we do that? Of course, I don't think that would be unchanged, whether they won this game by 100 or lost this game by 100. I think that like there's certain players you'd love to add and, the Crusoes of the world and guys we talked about. So it doesn't change it. What it does change for me though, is the idea that wondering about like sort of like what the upside is for this team, which has been something that I've been consistently unconvinced about, not like pessimistic about it, but just like cautiously optimistic about what the upside is because I don't see it when I see it.
Yeah, kind of. Games like this make that a lot easier to swallow. Like, so I think that from that I think they're always going to be a buyer. Like, I think that they're just too good at this point. But if you're trying to think about where they stand ultimately in the hierarchy, this game really helps with that.
Yeah, for sure. We'll just throw this one up there because it's Clash Bandicoot and he's a longtime flyer with us. Thanks, man. We busted our chops here on the 4K. Yeah. Do you see any holes in the lineup now or a waiver wire guy? Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of addressed that there. But for the most part, again, Like now it is, by the way, it's rinse and repeat. Now go show me a similar mentality against the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? Like that's kind of going to be what motivates my thinking around this roster is, can you repeat this and find maybe a slightly different way to go win against another team that presents different problems, right? So it's always going to be an evolving one. But for right now, like I'm good just to watch and see how this team grows. Because by the way, no Joe Harris in this game. Seth Curry minimally involved, Watanabe nothing, right? So there's still different combinations that can show up in better ways for you in other games too. What do you got?
Just a reminder for everyone that's in everyone that if you haven't hit subscribe, if you're in this chat right now and haven't hit subscribe, shame on you. Make sure you oops, I didn't click the wrong one here. I had a good one. Hold on one second. This one I like. Oh, the same person. The avatar. Ooh, baby, scary.
Nice.
It's like violent but threatening. How many minutes do you think TJ Warren's going to get with a healthy squad? This one, I think like 22 would be right probably in the sweet spot for him. I don't think he's like a 30-minute game guy. I don't think you want him to be. I think that he is probably right in that 22 to 24 range. And that's, by the way, for a bench player, that's like really high. Like very few bench players average that. If you think he's a bench player, like as long as you think he's a bench player, which he probably is, really no one in the league averages more than that coming off the bench, except for like Tyler Hero last year. Like it's a really high number.
And this would be where I would say, again, if we're going to just dabble into the improving the roster potentially kind of waters, this is where the better that Warren plays is maybe potentially the less critical that Seth Curry becomes, and where you want to add a more defensive minded piece. Like that's maybe what you dream on here is as a guy like Warren settles into his role and like Doug said, gets in that 20 kind of minute range, then you can think about a little tweak that you want to make. So hopefully it continues to move in that direction. How about this one, Dougster? Does this game confirm that Nick Claxton is a legitimate candidate for Defensive Player of the Year?
Well, it's funny about this. We've been on this train for a little bit. We had a podcast titled almost the exact same thing like 3 weeks ago or something like that, which was, I'm pretty sure it was, is Nick Claxton a Defensive Player of the Year candidate? No. So we're going to raise our hands, turn it around and give ourselves a pat in the back about where we were like on this call earlier. So, Gary, I think I don't think this game confirms it for me because I already thought that he was trending in this direction. But it
strengthens it against the team like this, right?
NBA TV, high profile game, impossible matchup with Giannis. And by the way, I didn't say this in the podcast. He wanted every part of it. Claxton wanted every single part of this. Like he was so chippy. He gave him a little shoulder shiver on the way out. They probably could have gotten teed up for because he definitely did it on purpose. Like Claxton's got a little bit of that, maybe a lot of bit of that in him. Like he's an angry dude. And I don't know if it's because he just is built that way. He didn't seem like this for a long time. He kind of is like leaning into this a little bit more this year. Angry on the dunks. I think probably could have gotten teed up a few times on some of these dunks where he hangs on the rim a few times, which I'd never, ever fault anybody for because I'll never dunk a ball. And by the way, if I could ever
I would never come down.
I'd be still hanging. I'd hang up there as long as the arms could take me. No, but in terms of the Defensive Player of the Year, I think he should be in the conversation for sure. I don't think he's going to probably get there because he's just like not popular enough. I think that's probably going to end up be what the problem is here. But it's not for lack of effort or lack of whatever he's done. I mean, this guy has gotten piled on at times by even Nets fans who wanted this guy out the door because they didn't think he didn't have all the things that people thought with their eyes you needed to be with a center. We have been on this from the very beginning that like the Nets have a center. It's Nick Claxton. Like we've been saying this for a long time. Like this is not a new thing. So Gary, I'm of the mind of I will do so many victory laps about this. Like for the rest of the time we're on the podcast, because we've been screaming this, like they already have a really good center. So I don't know. I'm going on here. I think he's in the conversation. Yes.
Yeah. He's deserving of it. And I think the best part about it is like, is he deserving of it? Yes. Does it matter if he gets it? Probably not, because almost to Doug's point, you think about, remember, he didn't play a lot his rookie year and a lot the second year and had these injuries things. I wonder if a little bit of where that edge has come from is that he's healthy, he's on the court, he's playing at a high level. A lot of people, like you said, even some of the fan base doesn't think he's good enough to be the starting center for this team. So if that's going to fuel him, man, I hope he never gets close to being Defensive Player of the Year, because that might actually draw the best out of him. And again, Something that we didn't get to talk about in the podcast there was his combination of play. Like, I actually think this is a really good thing that, I'm gonna give credit to Jacques Vaughn because he's the head coach now, and we've seen this shift. You've seen a difference of no longer, and this is early in the season, Simmons, they're just trying to figure this stuff out on the fly. One thing they seem to have figured out is, hey, Claxton's going to be the guy that is outrunning and attacking the rim. Ben Simmons, you need not get into the paint. By the way, the ball is going to be in your hands often, facilitating that transition. So they seem to have separated identities, even though both these players can do some similar things. They've now kind of, I think, compartmentalized Ben Simmons into a facilitate this ball, drive down court. If you can get in towards the basket on your own, great. And then Nicholas Claxton gets to play off of that. Same thing defensively. Like, you notice that they're kind of spacing them a little bit, so these guys aren't getting bogged down together on the defensive end of the floor, where you're kind of diminishing the value of spreading them out, getting good matchups, and using their length and size. So everything seems to be clicking the right direction for him right now.
Yeah, I take it back. It was November 11th, and it was why Nick Claxton. We didn't say defensive player of the year, although it was the NBA's most improved player of the year. So wow. I'm gonna put that in there with defensive because we were doing it basically built on the defense. So yeah. Same, but different, Gary. I just wanted to be honest about what we actually said at the time, so I was double checking what we named that podcast, but we said it was we said he was the most improved player.
How important from Bones? How important is it for being in first place in the East going into the playoffs? This is interesting too. Because we were talking about this as they were on this winning streak and saying, hey, can they really ever think about getting to the 2 seed, the 1 seed? Well, after a game like this, you at least say it's in the spectrum of possibilities. Do you think I'm more concerned about the fact that they can win these games and the fact that you're seeing it, as we said in the episode, do it so many different ways. As long as you're checking those boxes and you're living in the top 3 seeds, I probably don't care. Although it'll be interesting to see as the season progresses, if Barclays Center starts to become, a real home court advantage that they can play to, well, then I want every single advantage I can come playoff time. But I think as long as you're living in the upper tier there, I'm not going to worry about it because there's still going to be games when I say, where's the rest for Kevin Durant? That same process still exists inside of this for Brooklyn.
Yeah, I don't think you do it at the sake of just like making sure you're fully loaded for the playoffs. I think sometimes it's hard to know like what does that and what doesn't. First 4 seeds, so you're at least home for the first round, I think is pretty important. Like, and also too, like you don't want to risk having to face Boston or Milwaukee in the first round either, right? Like you don't want to be in a situation where that could be your first round matchup for whatever reason. And frankly, probably Cleveland too. So I think you do want to avoid that top, what we see probably as the top tier of teams. Maybe the Sixers are in that group too. So I think minimum getting to the 4 seed, probably the 3 seed is important to at least avoid that group. I think after that group, you're not so worried about what's happening. Again, this is now. Like, could some of these teams make trades and really improve? Like, could we see Miami make a trade and get better? Sure. Could we see Miami say this isn't our year and get worse? I could see that happening too, right? So I think I could see a couple different things happening. I think definitively what I would say is with seeding, I do not want to see them play in the first round. I don't want to see them play Boston, Milwaukee, or Philly as currently stated, and probably not Cleveland either. But that one I might even be able to live with.
And if you want to dream on those type of things down the road, it's like what do you want to have? I want to have a quote unquote easy first round series. Give me the first round series pretty easy, so it's not brutal test after brutal test. I thought this was a good one too. We talked about this a little bit. You brought up the odds the last couple of days here. Front runner for coach of the year. Front runner maybe too early, but up in the consideration of it. And you were kind of parsing out the differences between it. Well, a team that wasn't expected a lot that overachieves, that coach is going to get good consideration. When you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons, it does create this weird scenario, right? About like, well, you have some of the best players. Of course your team should be good, but we could be moving that direction that he should at least be in that top group there.
Yeah, I think the problem with this year's coach of the year thing is that there's like a few, at least right now, I think we said this in the last pod, that there's just, or whenever we talked about this, is that there's a few too many feel good stories going on in the NBA too. Like, and so there are, because usually it's just like, hey, were you the best team and you just dumpster a lot of their teams, or you made the very most with the least. And usually every year there's like one of those, and then there's like one really good team, and then there's one maybe feel good team. This year, there's so many feel-good teams that people did not think were going to be that good, like the Pacers, like the The Jazz are probably the classic example of this, right? Or the Kings even,
And then even a team like the Pelicans, though, who have a lot of talent and are now playing at the upper level of the Western Conference. Like, I think a big jump like that for a team is also something that the coach ends up taking a lot of credit for. And there's never going to be a time when the Nets, if they're the 3 seed, you go, they should be. Like, right, that's usually going to be the answer.
Yeah,
like, they should.
And that's
be
it. Like, because they're not like maybe better than the expectation. Even though I think Jacques Vaughn's done a fantastic job. Like, we love him, but like Will Hardy is like, they're so far above expectation in Utah. Mike Brown, they're significantly above expectation in Sacramento, right? And so these teams, Carlisle with the Pacers, like they're at 500. That's everyone thought that team was going to be in last place by a mile, right? So I think that there are, and not to mention just like Zula with the Celtics are 23-10. The Bucks are still 21-10. You know what I mean? Like, these are still other teams. And the Nuggets and the Grizzlies are really good. Willie Green with the Pelicans at 19-12. My point about just saying every coach here is that, like, there's so many cool stories and good teams right now that I don't think Vaughn has separated himself from that group at all. So I don't think he's probably at the top of that list by any stretch of the imagination.
Number one in my heart. If the Nets, and I think it's a good way to frame this too. If the Nets beat the Cavs, what does it say about the Nets other than grabbing the 3 seed? Like, again, it tells you that this team can play with the best teams in the league. Like that's what it tells you. That's what we've been waiting for. The Golden State Warriors, they weren't healthy enough for us to be able to check that box, other than saying it's awesome that you blew them out. That's what it would tell you. And then the Atlanta Hawks, I know they haven't been great this year and they've had some injuries, etc. Every time that you beat a team that has high quality talent on it, it's going to be another step in the right direction of just confirming. There'll be no sense of trepidation when you get late in the season, when you get to the playoffs, of saying, again, I said in the podcast, you adjust to us. Maybe we're your problem, not the other way around. And I think that could be the biggest shift in my thinking of the team over the rest of the season. Long way to go. Would be, okay, we are now the team you have to come after, instead of, can the Nets get themselves to a place where they can challenge these teams? That's probably the biggest switch that you could see.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what we're seeing here is that, like, we're seeing a clear shift with this team of, before it was squeaking out wins against bad teams. I like, there was a weird vibe around the team for a little while, because like even the wins felt like little asterisks, right? Like that, it was like, oh yeah, they should beat that team. They didn't have so-and-so. The Nets have a million examples from this year.
Trailing by double digits and then coming back to get a win against the Raptors. You go, oh, well, thank goodness you got the win, but it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, like, Blazers without Dame, like they have so many of these examples on the resume so far, where they were wins, and I'm glad the Nets have them, but it was hard to take a lot away from them, except to sometimes be a little disappointed, because it was like, hey, we should crush this team, right? Yeah. And so the Pistons the other night, where it's like, but even that was like they come back and do it. I think at this point, them dictating a certain style to the other team and make the other team have it be a problem for them is what we've said this on a few, not to reference every podcast here, but we said this a few podcasts ago, is like, hey, you dictate what you're going to do. Yeah. Like, you make it a problem. Is it conventional by current NBA standards to have Simmons and Claxton on this court at the same time? Well, no, but is there a way that it can really screw up other teams? Yeah. Right. It can really screw them up, and lean into the part where it really, really screws them up. And then we'll live with the parts that aren't perfect, because no team is perfectly built at this point. Every team has problems, and make your problems, live with your problems, but then make the things you do really well, make it be a bigger problem for the other team. And I think that's the other cool thing we're seeing.
For sure. Let's see what this last one is here, and then we'll probably close out here.
Yeah.
Might sound weird, but anyone notice that Claxton has been shooting more and more like Simmons classically has around the rim, more hooks included with, I mean, we probably talked about this, like, in the overall, that from Claxton's game, it has incrementally started to improve in different areas. Even in games like tonight, the fluidity with which he runs the floor and gets at the rim in transition, it didn't look the same going back to last season. He had a really hard time accepting entry passes and not, gathering, not taking the extra bounce before going up. So this is just the evolution of his game. Yes, he's starting to incorporate some of those little hook shots around the rim. Doug and I did note while we were watching this one that, like, Ben had an absolute, I'm talking beautiful little baby hook shot around the rim. He also threw a line drive that aggressively banked off of every angle of the basket and the backboard before falling in. At this point right now, Claxton has a more polished, consistent offensive game as opposed to Ben Simmons. But yeah, this is, again, why Claxton is, why we like him so much is because there's still untapped areas of his game that you're going to see evolve even over the course of this year. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, both those guys had a few little double bouncers on the rim that ended up falling.
The team had a handful of those tonight, which was beautiful to see them all go in.
The other thing about this is when you beat a team like Milwaukee by 18, you have to play well and you have to kind of get lucky. That's the story of the NBA. Like the story of the NBA is all these teams are really, really close. And, there's some that are marginally or, sometimes significantly better than the others. And at any given night, you kind of have to have the ball bounce your way a little bit. And the Nets, basically, I probably played the Bucks even if not better. And on all the 50-50 kind of stuff, the Nets won. Like the Nets had a lot of easy. I didn't want to say this in the podcast because it feels like I'm coming off negative. But as we close out, like the Nets had a bunch of little bouncers, like bunnies bouncers that went in. The Bucks missed a million wide open threes. Like that's not going to happen every night. It's not like it was Steph missing threes. So like these guys are going to miss more threes than than Klay Thompson and Steph Curry on a given night. So that can be expected. But the Bucks, by the nature of the looks that they got, a lot of which were very wide open, for them to shoot like 25% or whatever it was from three, the Nets got a little lucky. The math on that also says, by the way, if the Bucks had gotten that up to 40%, the Nets still would have won, right?
Right.
Because that's like up to 40%. Like the quick napkin math on that was like 5 more threes, and that's 15 more points. The Nets still win by 3. So like what I'm saying is I think they played marginally better than the Bucks here. And I don't take too much away from a blowout because I do think the blowout was predicated some on the ball bouncing the Nets way a few more times in this game than the Bucks. And like, that's just the NBA. Like if you watch a lot of NBA games, that's just kind of sometimes how it goes.
Hey, guess what, man? The Bucks are 16th in the NBA in 3-point shooting. They're only knocking down 35%. It was a 10% difference. What's the problem? No, overall, man, as we said, great game, great win. Cavs are up next. We really appreciate it. Doug said in the podcast. Remind you again, subscribe. We love seeing this many people being a part of the post-game live sessions.
This is amazing. Yeah,
it really is. And we love seeing the questions in the comments. We try to hit as many of them as we can. Always keep them coming. Get in the chats on the videos as well. We always try to circle back to those throughout the course of the season. That is it for us, my friends. We'll be back again Monday. You will hear from me post-game Monday night. So be there for that right here back live on YouTube and on that podcast feed. We'll be talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball, baby.